selling a home in historic areas like Alamo Heights, Terrell Hills, Olmos Park, or Monte Vista, one of the biggest questions that tends to come up early in the process is whether staging really matters for a home that already has character, architecture, and a strong sense of identity. Because on one hand, these homes often have features that feel inherently valuable. Original hardwood floors, detailed trim and millwork, historic fireplaces, built-ins, and layouts that reflect a completely different era of design. And it's very natural to assume that these features will carry the experience on their own, that buyers will walk in, recognize the character, and immediately connect with it. But what we consistently see in today's market is that buyers are not just reacting to what the home has, they're reacting to how clearly they can understand it. And that difference is where staging becomes incredibly important, because staging in a historic home is not about decorating. It's not about making a home feel trendy or modern in a way that strips away its identity. It's about interpretation. It's about helping a buyer walk through a space that may feel unfamiliar at first, but very quickly they understand how it lives, how it flows, how it can work for them today. And that is especially important in neighborhoods like 78209 and 78212, where homes can vary significantly in layout, room size, ceiling height, overall function, because if a buyer has to work to understand a home, even if the home is beautiful, that extra effort creates hesitation. And hesitation is what slows momentum. And this is not just something we see in conversations or showings. It's supported by actual data, because according to information from the National Association of Realtors, 83% of buyer's agents said that staging makes it easier for their buyers to visualize a property as a future home. The idea that visualization is really the foundation of this entire conversation is interesting, because buyers really don't make decisions based on facts alone. They make decisions based on how easily they can see themselves in a space. And when that visualization is clear, decisions happen faster. But when it's unclear, even slightly, buyers tend to pause. And when buyers pause, they often move on to something that feels easier to understand. So what I want to do is walk you through the 7 things to understand about staging a historic home so that you can make decisions that are thoughtful, strategic, and aligned with how buyers are actually thinking. And the first thing you need to understand is that staging is not about modernizing a historic home. It's about clarifying it. Because one of the biggest concerns we hear from sellers is that staging will take away from the character of their home, or maybe make their home feel like every other property on the market. And when staging is done without intention, that actually can happen. But when it's done correctly, it does the opposite. It removes distractions so that the architectural features become more visible. It simplifies the space so that buyers can focus on what matters. And it creates a sense of flow that helps the home feel easier to navigate. And in historic homes where rooms may be more segmented or layouts may not follow modern expectations, that clarity becomes incredibly valuable. Because without it, buyers may misinterpret how a space functions. They may underestimate the size of a room. They may simply move through the home without fully understanding what they're seeing, and that can diminish the impact of the home even when the features themselves are strong. So staging becomes less about adding and more about removing the barriers that prevent buyers from seeing what's already there. And the second thing you need to understand is that buyers' expectations around presentation have changed significantly. Oh my gosh, a lot, even for historic homes. And this is where many sellers are surprised, because there's often an assumption that buyers who are looking at historic properties are less concerned with presentation and more focused on character. And while character absolutely matters, presentation still shapes the first impression, especially in the way homes are experienced online. Because before a buyer ever schedules a showing, they are looking at photos. And these photos are setting expectations. And according to that same NAR report, 48% of respondents said that buyers expect homes to look similar to how they are staged on television. And 58% said that buyers are often disappointed when homes do not meet those expectations. And that doesn't mean your home needs to be staged in a way that's overly styled or unrealistic, but it does mean the presentation needs to feel intentional. It needs to feel cohesive. It needs to help the buyer understand the space quickly, because if photos feel confusing, cluttered, or unclear, buyers may not make the next step, even if the home itself would have been a strong fit. And this is especially relevant in neighborhoods like Monte Vista, where architectural detail is a major draw, because buyers are often searching specifically for these homes. But they are still filtering based on how approachable and understandable the home feels in those first few seconds of viewing it online. The third thing you need to understand is that staging does not need to happen everywhere to be effective. It needs to happen in the right places. This is where staging becomes much more strategic and much less overwhelming, because one of the most helpful insights from the NAR data is that buyers consistently focus on a few key spaces when forming their impression of a home, especially the living room, the primary bedroom, and the kitchen. All these areas where buyers are imagining their daily life, or they are picturing how they will spend time, and where clarity matters the most. And in a historic home, these spaces often carry even more weight because they help define how the home feels in today's context. What that means is that you can prioritize these areas, make them feel complete, cohesive, and easy to understand, and allow the rest of the home to be simpler without losing any impact. Because when those key spaces are done well, they create a sense of confidence that carries through the rest of the property. And when buyers feel confident in those primary areas, they are much more willing to accept variation or simplicity in the secondary spaces. And when you step back and you look at these first 3 points together, you can start to see that staging historic home is not about changing what makes it special. It's about making sure that what makes it special is actually seen, understood, appreciated in the way that it was intended. When that happens, the home becomes much easier for buyers to connect with, and that connection is what ultimately drives stronger interest and better results. Once you understand that staging a historic home is about clarifying it, that buyer expectations around presentation are higher than they used to be, and that you can focus your efforts on the spaces that mattered most, now you can think about the fourth thing, which is understand that an occupied home still benefits significantly from professional staging guidance. This is where a lot of sellers assume staging only applies to vacant homes, but in reality, most homes we work with are actually occupied. And the opportunity is not necessarily to bring in new furniture, it's to refine what's already there. This is where decluttering, depersonalizing becomes incredibly important, because in a lived-in historic home, there are often layers of personal style, collections, and furniture that have been accumulated over time. And while those elements may feel natural and comfortable to you, they create visual complexity for a buyer who is seeing the home for the first time. And what staging does in this context is simplify. It removes excess, it repositions furniture to improve flow, and it helps define each space more clearly so that buyers don't have to interpret it on their own. And according to agents, consistently, we know that decluttering and cleaning are one of the most important steps in preparing a home for sale. And that aligns exactly with what we see locally in areas like Alamo Heights and Monte Vista, where homes that often have strong architectural presence but can be visually heavy if too many elements are competing for attention. And when that visual weight is reduced, the home immediately feels more open, more intentional, and easier to understand. And that leads directly to the fifth thing you need to understand, which is that some homes benefit significantly from a full or partial furniture staging, even when they are already furnished. And this is where staging becomes even more strategic, because not every home needs it, but certain layouts, especially in historic properties, can be difficult for buyers to interpret without clear visual clues. And this is where bringing in select pieces, or in some cases fully staging the home, can dramatically change how the space is experienced. And I want to give you a real example of this because it illustrates the point clearly. We recently worked with a home that had previously been on the market and had not sold. That happens. They called us. We were the third agents. And from a structural standpoint, the home had strong features. It was in great location. It had character. And the way it was being presented was good, but it made it difficult for buyers to connect with it. The layout wasn't immediately clear. The furniture placement didn't highlight the scale of the room. And the overall presentation felt really a bit disjointed. What we recommended was not a major renovation. It was staging with updated photography, a strategic reintroduction to the market. And once those changes were made, the difference was immediate. The home felt more cohesive. The spaces had more sense, and buyers were able to move through with a much clearer understanding of how it lived. And as a result, we received an offer within the first week of relaunching this property. And that's a perfect example of how staging is not about adding value in a traditional sense. It's about unlocking the value that's already there by making it visible and understandable. That leads directly to the sixth thing you need to understand, which is staging has a measurable impact on how buyers engage with a home, particularly in the early stages of a listing. And this is where the data reinforces what we have seen in practice. Because according to what we see, staged homes not only make it easier for a buyer to visualize the space, they often influence how buyers perceive value. And in some cases, how much they are willing to offer. And while the exact impact can vary depending on the home and the market, the consistent theme is that staging improves the clarity of the experience. And clarity leads to stronger engagement. Stronger engagement is what creates momentum, and momentum is what ultimately drives outcome. This is especially important in historic areas like Terrell Hills, Olmos Park, where buyers are often comparing homes with very different layouts, very different levels of update, because when a home is staged well, it doesn't just look better, it feels easier to understand. And when something's easier, buyers are more likely to spend time with it, more likely to revisit it, more likely to make, the next step, which is an offer. And when you step back and you look at these 3 points together, you can start to see that staging is not a cosmetic decision. It's a strategic one. It's not about reducing friction. It's about increasing clarity and making it easier for buyers to connect with a home in a meaningful way. And once you understand how staging clarifies a historic home, how buyer expectations have evolved, how to prioritize the right spaces, and how to approach the staging in an occupied home, how staging can actually completely change the way the property is experienced, the seventh and final thing you need to understand about staging your historic home in areas like Alamo Heights, Terrell Hills, Olmos Park, and Monte Vista is that staging ultimately is about helping buyers make decisions faster, with more confidence. And this is where everything we've talked about comes together, because buyers are not just evaluating whether they like a home, they are evaluating whether they understand it well enough to move forward. And when that understanding is clear, when the layout makes sense, when the scale feels right, when the spaces feel intentional, buyers don't have to pause and interpret. They can respond. And that response is what creates momentum. And momentum is what drives stronger outcomes, not just in terms of interest, but in terms of timing, consistency of showings, and ultimately offers. This is also where staging connects to buyer behavior in the real world, because according to the NAR, a significant percentage of buyers are influenced by how a home looks in photos and in person. And I can just tell you, from being with buyers day in and day out, staging makes a huge difference. Makes a difference on how they feel once they're inside the home. It makes a difference on how they see it online, how they think about it when they're, imagining their life. It's about making it easier for them to move from curiosity to action. And that's especially important in historic homes, where uniqueness of the property can either be a strength or a point of hesitation, depending on how clearly it is presented. This is also where I want to connect with everything we've talked about to make this meaningful you. If you're thinking about selling, because the goal is not to walk away from this conversation and feel like you need to stage everything or completely change your home. The goal is to understand where staging creates the most impact and how to apply it in a way that supports your specific property. In many cases, the most effective starting point is not bringing in furniture, it's simplifying what's already there, decluttering, depersonalizing, and creating a more neutral, open presentation that allows the architecture to stand out. This aligns directly with the NAR report highlights, where the majority of agents recommend decluttering, please, cleaning, yes, and improving overall presentation as a foundational step before listing the home. And from there, the next level of staging becomes a strategic decision, identifying whether certain rooms would benefit from additional support, whether furniture placement needs to be adjusted, or whether the home would perform better with a partial or full staging, depending on its layout, condition. And this is exactly how we approach staging with our clients, because not every home needs the same level of intervention. And the goal is always to create clarity, really without overdoing it. And that's also where I want to briefly introduce myself. If we haven't met yet, I'm Caroline Decherd with the Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Browning Company. One of the things we focus on with every listing is helping our clients prepare their home in a way that aligns with how buyers are actually evaluating properties today. That includes providing professional guidance on decluttering and depersonalization. We do that for every client, because that foundational step alone can significantly improve how a home is perceived. And in some cases, we recommend additional staging, where that's bringing in select pieces to define key spaces, or fully staging a property when the layout would benefit from it. And what's important is that these decisions are made strategically, not based on assumptions, but based on how the home is likely to be experienced by buyers in the current market. And when you step back and you look at all these 7 points together, you can start to see a very clear pattern. First, staging is about clarifying the home, not modernizing it. Second, buyers expect a level of presentation that's higher than sellers really realize. Third, focusing on key rooms creates the most important impact. Fourth, occupied homes benefit from staging guidance just as much as vacant ones. Fifth, homes benefit from partial or full staging depending on the layout, and we help you figure that out. Sixth, staging directly impacts buyer engagement. And now the seventh, staging helps buyers move from interest to decisions more quickly. And when those 7 things are applied together, the entire selling experience changes, the home feels easier to understand, buyers respond more clearly, and the process tends to move forward with more consistently and less uncertainty. And that's our goal, not just to make the home look good, but really make it easy for the right buyer to connect with it. So if you're thinking about selling in the next 3 to 6 months, the best next step is to start the process early, to walk through your home with a clear strategy in mind, to understand what preparation would look like, and to decide what level of staging actually makes sense for your specific property. Because it's really never too early to start planning, and when you start early, you give yourself the time to make thoughtful decisions, to prepare the home without pressure, and to be fully ready when the right buyer comes along. If you'd like help with that process, understanding how your home would be positioned, and creating a plan that aligns with your goals, you can reach out to me and we can walk through it together. Because really the right preparation doesn't just improve how a home looks, it improves how it performs when it matters most. Again, I'm Caroline Decherd with the Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Browning Company. Thanks for watching.